he or she does not feel safe, what would make them feel safe? What can we ask them in terms of what's making them feel unsafe and what needs to change to help them to feel safer in their community or their home? When we're talking about, excuse me, everyone getting along in their family, we think about the relationships. Some children get along with some siblings, one parent versus another parent, and really working with the family as a whole to make sure that everybody is getting along and treats each other with respect. I put in here a blended family because a lot of times we may see a family that's blended with let's say a stepmother or stepfather treating the stepchild differently than their own biological children. That can lead to feelings of worthlessness or fear, anxiety. The children could feel these things. So when we're training our staff, we need to think about how the staff are asking the questions and assessing for those types of relationships. Who does the client feel he or she can go to with problems? We're talking about natural supports in this. If a child feels that they are alone and don't have anyone to talk to about their problems, they may resort to at-risk behaviors. We also have to look at the current or history of domestic violence. It is imperative to assess if there is currently a violent situation or if there is a history of violence in the home. The implications for the child, his or her siblings, the parent, and the staff must be considered during the course of treatment. When I was a home-based therapist, I was at a home, and the stepfather of the children, there was a history of domestic violence with that, and the stepfather would on occasion act in a coercive or threatening manner to myself and the other staff members who were in the home. So when we're thinking about safety for our staff, we have to, if they are going into the homes or even if the clients are coming to the office, we have to think about how we can help the staff assess their safety in regards to someone who may have a violent streak in them. We also have to look at a history of abuse and neglect. It is important to gain information regarding the family's history of abuse or neglect. Many parents will admit to a history of involvement with protective services, and staff must learn as much as they can about the referrals made. It's difficult a lot when our parents won't be forthcoming about these incidents. There is a large feeling of shame for these families when protective services is called on them. So there is that, a lot of times there's a defense mechanism that the parents may experience when talking to the staff about the history of protective services involvement. But it's important to make sure that we're assessing all that we can with protective services so that we are aware, our staff are aware of the history, what's been going on, and ways that we can help the family to change their disciplinary actions, those types of things, so that we can really make sure that we are helping the family to have safe ways of disciplining their children and being a part of that process. We also have to look at scapegoating. A lot of children may be singled out within the family as the cause of all familial problems. It is important to assess the onset of this thinking, what behaviors are occurring in the home as a result, such as bullying, blaming, harsh discipline, and threats. I have experienced a lot of kids who, a lot of families who have a particular child that they turn to when they want to blame the behaviors of the other children. Well, the younger child is acting like the older child. The other children are in turmoil because of this one child, because of what this child does. So when our staff are working with these families, it's important for them to really take into consideration all of the family dynamics, and if this is going on, how can we help that child, and how can we help that family to recognize that it may not be that child's fault for everything. We need to help them to assess for those types of family dynamics so that we can really reframe things for the family to see it in a different light. I'm going to talk about psychotropic medications. Many of our children are prescribed psychotropic medications, and we need to look at abuse, compliance, street value, and who in the family is prescribed medications and who administers the medications. With abuse of psychotropic medications, children and or his or her parents could misuse the medications prescribed by their psychiatrist, either by taking more than the prescribed dose, or parents may administer their own medications to quiet or calm their child. I've heard of many instances when a parent says, well, I just give them my usually benzodiazepine, to quiet them down. It works for me, it can work for them. So we need to be really careful on finding out all of the different medications that are prescribed in the home, who's taking what, and sometimes when we're, for home-based staff or case managers who are in the home, I've had cases where we've had to count pills, make sure that everybody is taking the prescribed dose as recommended, and making sure that they are administered correctly. We also have to look at safety in terms of compliance. If a child fails to take his or her medications regularly as prescribed, this will affect the medication's effectiveness, which could exacerbate symptoms. It is important to note compliance issues so that the doctor does not increase the dose or compensate for lack of symptom management. Meaning that if many of the psychotropic medications take several weeks to take effect, or to show, I should say, to show the effects of the medications. So a lot of times parents may want to up the child's medications because they don't think it's working. The child may not be compliant in taking the medication. So if the child is not taking the medications regularly, the symptoms are going to be more present, and then we tell the doctor that the child is acting in a certain way. The child, or the doctor rather, may prescribe more medication, a different medication, and change the medications when, in fact, they weren't actually compliant with the first regimen that they were prescribed. We also have to look at street value of medications. Many that are prescribed to our clients and their parents have a street value and may be sold to others. The most prevalent are benzodiazepines and stimulants, among others. The other 2 times that I did this training, I told a story about I had a very minor surgery on my hand, and my doctor prescribed an antibiotic as well as Vicodin. And there must have been a typo because I had 110 antibiotics and 110 Vicodin. And I always joke that I was like, whoa, there's a lot of money in this, but of course I didn't sell it. But for me, who's aware of these things, I can make those types of decisions. But for our families, if there is just a typo or whatever happened to give me all this medication, our families might misuse it by taking it, selling it, whatever the case may be. So we have to be really careful also when we are working with our doctors to make sure that everyone is getting the right amount of medication so that there is no danger in them overdosing on something such as Vicodin. We also need to know who in the family is prescribed medications. This is important to assess for the reasons given above. A lot of parents won't share with us that they're prescribed these medications or those medications, but if our staff could continually assess that, we may have a better idea of what's going on in the home. Who administers medication to the child? Many parents will simply tell their children to administer their own medications, go take your meds, have you taken your meds today, without actually being a part of that process. It's important to discuss with the parents that as long as the child is a minor, the onus is on the parent to ensure the medication is taken properly. One thing I always tell my staff is that the parent, even if the child is 17 years old, they're still a minor, the parent needs to be, if not giving the medication to them, watch them take the medication, make sure they're not cheeking it, make sure they're not spitting it out, so that we can make sure that, again, the medications are working as they were intended to. Street drugs. Adverse interactions with prescription medications. Many children and adolescents use substances such as alcohol, marijuana, K2, bath salts, etc. These substances on their own are very dangerous and affect the growing brain. I don't know if you all know this, but the brain is not fully developed until your early 20s. So when our children are taking the psychotropic medications that we're prescribing them, that's still going to affect their brain chemistry and the development of their brain. When you add street drugs to that, obviously it's going to be a very bad impact on their brain. When clients use street drugs while taking prescribed psychotropic medications, the substances will interact with the medications, sometimes exacerbating symptoms or negating the positive effects of the medications. I also wanted to talk about the societal push recently for the legalization of marijuana. This poses a huge risk to our youth. Many of the parents we work with have medical marijuana cards, allowing them to possess the drug and sometimes grow it. Many of our children are affected by this, as it has become a part of the family culture to use the street drug, and it can now be readily available to our youth. I always think when we have a child who is using marijuana and we don't want them to use marijuana, but mom or dad or both are growing and using, and that's part of their culture, how can we expect that child to stop using marijuana when everybody else in the family uses it and they don't see how the marijuana can affect what's going on with their own brain and their own behaviors. So it's important for our staff to really understand what's going on with the family if this is something that they are involved with, so that we can make sure that everybody's on the same page when it comes to how marijuana can affect the child in terms of their behaviors, as well as how it can affect or interact with the psychotropic medications that have been prescribed. Looking at school safety, bullying, we look at bullying others as perpetrators and the clients as perpetrators. Bullying is very prevalent in our schools, and our clientele are at high risk for being bullied. It may be embarrassing for the client to disclose if this behavior is occurring. It is helpful to have a therapist or case manager who is in collaboration with the current school social worker, psychologist, teacher, or other personnel in order to fully understand the client's situation at school. It's very scary to think of some of the things that are happening to our youth in the schools in terms of bullying. It can be psychological, it could be physical. Sometimes when a child is bullied, they will respond in an aggressive manner and fight back. A lot of times I hear that a child is being bullied and then they get in trouble for retaliation. It's really important for our staff to be working closely with the school so we really understand what is going on in that school environment, to find out if the child is being bullied, what we can do to help that child, and identify those who may be doing the bullying, so that we can find ways to manage those behaviors and fix what's going wrong. We also want to look at our clients as perpetrators. This is also very prevalent because bullying is just all over the place. The school personnel, the collaboration with the school personnel is important to alleviate this as well. These types of behaviors may put our client at a higher risk of harm from others. Again, if our children are bullying others as aggressive behaviors verbally or physically, they may be hurt in the process. If getting in fights is something that children do often, regardless if they are our clients getting into fights, regardless of if they are starting the fights or just defending themselves, our staff have to really look at and see how that is affecting our child psychologically, our clients psychologically, as well as physically. A lot of times, bullying will affect a child psychologically, and those scars will last a lot longer than the actual bruises or types of things that might be happening with physical aggression. We also have to look at proper services in the schools. Many of our clients would benefit from services within the schools that fall under an IEP, a 504 plan, etc. It is important for our clinicians and case managers to advocate for appropriate services, allowing the child to be in an environment that is conducive to learning at his or her level of need that will assist the client in feeling and being successful. This may in turn lead to more pro-social activities. When a child is in a classroom that they are not doing well in, we all know that can affect them in a lot of different ways. They may feel embarrassed, they may feel stupid, they may feel different than the other kids, and these can all end up really hurting the child psychologically. So with the services that we can obtain from these schools, having them in a